My name is Sam Rose, and this is Ars Poetica, A Girl Called Poetry. Poetry dresses in bright colours, layers of patterned skirts, long-sleeved t-shirts under short sleeves, large floppy sun hats. She dislikes the constraints of socks and shoes, and will go barefoot everywhere so she can feel the ground beneath her. She is doe-eyed with soft, pouty lips. She is beautiful, but in an understated, unexpected way. She can change her look for any occasion, and she practices yoga and meditation. She is flexible and thoughtful as she takes in the world around her. She speaks in metaphors and handwrites letters to her friends and relatives, even the ones she doesn't get along with. She is not perfect, but she always behaves and looks like the person she feels she needs to be. Often when poetry looks in the mirror, she sees her cuts and bruises, her scars, the parts of herself nobody has touched for so long, the barren stretches of flesh she has kept hidden. But sometimes she looks in the mirror and she puts on her makeup in search of her perfect self and all the possibilities of the person she could be. I write memoir because I think that there's a lot of inspiration in my life and in everybody's life to dive into. I really believe that everybody has a story from their life worth telling, and it's just about finding the right angle for it. And I don't think that inspiration has to be from something big. I think you can make essays and memoirs from any tiny detail of your life, because it's those tiny details that make up so much of the world. So I don't think that you have to have had a life-changing or unique experience in order for your life to be worth writing about in memoir. You can just make your story unique when you're writing it. So that's why I like to write memoir. And I feel my life experiences recently, because I've had a serious illness over the last few years, that has especially led to me writing memoir, and I did write a full-length memoir about that. I also like writing guest blog posts for websites and dabbling in that space between poetry and prose as well, as opposed to fiction, because I find creating characters and plots quite difficult, but I do feel comfortable and confident writing about my own life, and I'm really open about everything, and I don't mind sharing, so memoir and poetry is where I'm most comfortable. This piece, Ars Poetica, A Girl Called Poetry, actually came from a university assignment during my Masters in Creative Writing. So I wrote it in around 2016. And the assignment for us was to write an Ars Poetica, or a manifesto about our writing. So an Ars Poetica is a piece of writing that explains the art of poetry. Someone called Horace in 19 BC did an early example, which is kind of where this form comes from. So we were asked to think about what writing means to us, how we see our writing, what we want to do with our writing, and we had to write a piece thinking about our techniques and our thoughts and feelings about our writing. So it was a very personal assignment for all of us, and also really useful because it made us think about ourselves as writers and our unique approaches to writing, and what we want to do with our writing and what we want to get out of it as well. So my Ars Poetica is influenced by a book called The Book of Qualities by J. Ruth Gendler. And in this book she used personification to explain all these different human qualities. So she'd have a section on perfection, on compassion, faith, longing, certainty, all these different things. And she would describe each one of these qualities like it's a person in this really vivid way. So she'd explain what they're wearing, what do they do and how do they act, and what do they look like. So things like worry makes a list of things that could go wrong while she's waiting for the train, or excitement wears orange socks. And that's something that I tried to do as well by explaining my poetry as if it was a person, and thinking about what my poetry would wear, where she would live, what her demeanour would be like, what would she like to do. So she lives in a cottage, she loves to sing, she's cheerful, and that's kind of the way that I saw my writing as a person. So it was actually a really fun piece to be able to think about it in this new way. I don't really remember how long it took me to write it, but I probably wrote the entire first draft in one sitting, maybe a couple of hours, and then I likely let it just sit for a while and just left it, and then came back to edit it later. That's how I normally work. And as well, because this was an assignment, then it had a deadline, which I think can be really useful, even if you're just giving yourself a deadline for your writing. It's always good to have something to work towards. I'd say when you're trying to find ideas for writing memoir, I really recommend using prompts because they can lead you to all sorts of interesting places that you might not have previously thought about. So I've got a really great book called Old Friend from Far Away by Natalie Goldberg, and it's absolutely full of loads of different prompts, even just like really small things like write about apples, or write about a bad storm that you were in once, or what does home mean to you. And sometimes these really small things can conjure up a memory that opens up a whole new thread of thinking. So if you started with that prompt about thinking about apples and just writing, your thoughts on apples, maybe you had an apple tree in the garden when you were a kid. Maybe you used to pick apples, and then, I don't know, maybe you found like a worm in one of the apples one time and that was the whole story. Maybe you nearly ate it. Maybe you gave it to somebody as a trick. And maybe that reminds you of something else. Maybe you spent a lot of time in the garden where the apple tree is, and that's where you developed a strong relationship with a family member. And then, so this tiny idea of what do you think about apples, what do apples mean in your life, could lead to this whole string of other memories and larger ideas. So I'd say just keep playing around with prompts and see what sparks this knock-on effect or chain of memories for you to get started. My favourite book is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl, and it's a full-length memoir, and I love it because it gives me so much food for thought. So Viktor E. Frankl was a psychiatrist who spent time in Nazi concentration camps in the Second World War. This book is about his account of those experiences during the Holocaust. He does a great job of describing what the conditions were like there, what people's states of minds were. So it's a really interesting read, especially from his point of view as a psychiatrist. As the title is Man's Search for Meaning, that's what it's really about. It's about man's search for meaning in life, and how when we have meaning and purpose in our lives, then that can really have a positive effect on our mental and physical health. And he even says that people want meaning in their life more than they want to be happy, and that's more of the thing that we're looking for as humans, not so much happiness, but meaning. So that was really interesting for me. I'm doing my PhD at the moment, so I read this book as part of my research. I'm really glad I found it. But it is a really easy read, which I think is important. It's very accessible and very vivid and detailed, but it also makes me as the reader think about my own life as well, which I think is a really great thing for a memoir to be able to do, to highlight parts of the reader's life and hold up a mirror for them, but also doing that while writing about the author's own experiences. So that's why I love that book. Well, all of the things that I'm sort of currently working on, I'm doing some webinars and things. I'm doing webinars on writing about illness for cancer and serious illness survivors. And I've got my poetry and things. They can all be found on my website, which is writersam.co.uk.